Hello, everybody. Welcome to this episode of Canines Talking Sense. I'm your host, Cameron Ford, as usual. Today's guest really doesn't need much of an introduction if you've been in the dog world for more than 5 minutes, but maybe in the detection dog world, the name is not as common. But with that said, Armin Winkler, thank you very much for coming on and taking the time to just talk to me, and we'll talk some dogs and all kinds of stuff. But thank you for doing this.
Yeah, you're very welcome. I appreciate the invitation. And, today's topic is not necessarily my forte, so to speak, but I have my 2 cents to give to it as well. So we'll see. Yeah. We'll see how it runs.
And that's so for everybody watching and listening, the reason why this kind of came about was, as some of you have seen, I have made some posts asking questions about certification and standards. And within that, Armin had kind of got on there, gave some really good input, a lot of stuff that I also support and believe. And I think if anybody who knows Armin well enough knows he's one of the people that really holds the line when it comes to standards. And when we don't do that, things start falling apart. So I thought nothing better than just to have and to do something different than I think you typically get. You get lots of training discussions and things of that nature, but this would be fun because it's not the normal type of conversation when we're talking about standards. So with that said, how this premise kind of came about, like I was saying, was from the social media post. So standards, let's just start off with what the typical definition of certification is. And as we both know, people define it as a minimum standard. But tell us what you feel and what you kind of look at when it comes to quote unquote certification for people. And we'll keep it in the detection realm for right now, because obviously most of the audience is from that. So just speak about what you view certification is, what it should be, and a little bit about your feelings on this topic.
Well, you may be able to educate me on some of this a little bit, because when I first moved to Virginia, there was no certification requirement. It still isn't by state. It's sort of a departmental thing that they sort of have it in the SOP that they want certification for their canines. But when I first moved here, none of the dogs were certified, but they were very productive on the street, and they were unchallengeable in court, so to speak, because they had their training records well documented. I think some of the programs that are out there don't really give the narrative detail as much as the old written training records used to do. And, is that a good thing or a bad thing? I think it's good to capture all that stuff in a computerized manner, but there should be an expansion or an elaboration on what you did in training. A lot of it has to do, I remember back in the day, I used to sign people's notes, their training records, because people can go out, I can go out by myself, do some detection training, and, right afterwards, like I look for this substance, I look for this substance, the dog found it all, it was a great day, I'm awesome, and my dog is awesome. But when somebody else is observing, you should make a note of that in your records, that so-and-so was present watching this. And he wasn't just there, shooting the breeze with 5 other guys sitting in chairs. He was actually walking along and watching every second of what your dog and you were doing when you were training. I think that's a hugely valuable thing, and that to me sets the standard. The certifications themselves, I look at them much more as and that goes for all the certifications, kind of a covering the department's butt. It has, for me, no other value. It really doesn't. It doesn't have any more value in court than training records. It's, people can look into what the certification standard is. And to me, especially in detection, we can talk about apprehension and that at another time. But for detection, it shouldn't be a minimum standard. It should be an operational standard. There should never be a minimum standard for dogs that are basically giving officers a way around the Fourth Amendment.
Mm-hmm.
There should be nothing minimalistic about that. And the certifications, the way they're set up to me they're a very unrealistic setup for the dogs. The number of hides in the number of different environments, because we want to check off the dog will work rooms, vehicles, luggage, maybe open area if you want to do it all. That many hides in one day, back to back to back to back, it's almost inevitable that the dog makes a mistake or zones out or something like that. It's just too many. I think, odor recognition can be a minimal standard if you want to go by minimal standard, right? That doesn't necessarily mean that the team can function to actually find things in the real world. But we know as a baseline that the dog can recognize all these odors in an environment where he can compare that odor to a non-target odor, right? A distraction odor, if you will, or a blank, all right? But it doesn't end there. It is certification day. A lot of times has multiple teams doing the same run. There's nasal secretions, saliva, all kinds of stuff on the hides themselves, on top of the odor, the target odor itself. It taints everything a little bit. Like if I think if lawyers were a little bit more familiar with certification standards, they would be able to challenge that in a pretty substantial way, right? Yeah. There is the one thing that's not tested in any certification is decision making. Like the evaluator tells you, like in this room or in this area, and sometimes when they're running out of space, they're saying like this half of the room counts as one area and this half of the room counts as a second area. It's just they need to get the hides in, they need to get the number of hides in and the number of odors. And to me, it's like if the dog can recognize all the odors that he's supposed to be able to recognize, and he can find 2 or 3 of them in an operational setting, that is more realistic than making sure that the dog, like if a dog can find cocaine on the outside of a car and he can find meth on the inside of a car, my assumption would be that he can find meth on the outside and coke on the inside. But the dog has to perform both in some of the certifications. They just duplicate everything ad nauseum. And there's some systems where the evaluator does not give sort of a confirmation of the find. But there's lots of systems where the evaluator will confirm it to the handler, because they don't want the handler to reward their dog if they're wrong, right? Yes. So that involves the evaluator too much in the outcome, my opinion. Right? Like the certification and the standard is the same for the first-time graduate freshly out of school and the 5-year veteran. That makes no sense to me, right? I think it should be sort of a release. Something should allow the dog to be utilized on the street. And then after that, there should also be at least one test for the new team, whether they can function operationally. And then it should be, the season teams, like the next year when they renew, it should be a more difficult test.
Yes.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, I mean, you brought up so many good things. I'll start with running numerous dogs in the same area. That doesn't happen operationally, bomb, drug, et cetera, et cetera. You might have a few maybe in the cadaver world that will do that operationally, but we'll kind of keep it in within a couple lanes for this conversation. So I very much agree. I also think it's a training flaw that we constantly do that. And people will say, oh, well, we'll just change the running order for the dogs. Okay, I'll give you a little bit of that can help. But the bigger issue is, I tongue in cheek kind of call it the cheat code, where the dog is using other bits of information that happen predictably in training that don't happen in reality to help solve the problem, which is why when it disappears in reality, we see a drop off depending on the dog on what pieces they were using that weren't odor to solve the problem. Now, and I also love what you brought up about the evaluator aspect about this, because there's going to be a video that comes out where I basically highlight that thing. How do we police the evaluators from giving away too much of the test? One, through nonverbal communication. We all know when a person, when everybody kind of shuts up in the group, you must be near a hide. Or when there's 10 heads inside the room that you're searching, probably a hide. And any number of different things. Or when you're the only one walking down the row of cars, 10 cars, and no one's going with you, probably another clue that you're nowhere near something. So, the industry knows this exists. And like you said, anybody with any kind of decent a lawyer that took the time to really look into this, could really start poking holes. And then you add what kind of happened out in Utah, where the Utah Post kind of got questioned and the certification had to be adjusted when they knew how many hides they had. So you're like 5 cars, 2 fines. So if the handler makes 2 fines, and just like you said, the evaluator confirms, they're not going to even bother searching any cars that are left because I've already done it. Versus, and I like this very much, is the evaluator does not confirm or deny your responses until the test is over. But the point you made, why everybody avoids that, is everybody's fear of rewarding the wrong thing or not rewarding. And my point to that, which is probably similar to yours, if you are afraid of that, then you aren't even ready to test. If that's such a grave concern of yours, that if you rewarded the wrong thing at this moment in time, that you actually have probably a bigger problem than rewarding right now.
But to be fair, I think the setup induces some of the, most of the time, it's an incorrect indication. That's usually the big worry, right?
Yep.
Most of the dogs are perfectly fine with 1 or 2 fines. Most dogs are not fine with 15. That's just after a while they get tired and they start offering behaviors that are not the result of locating odor. They are an offering because they have I think, wasn't it Pat Nolan that touched a little bit on the fact that there's times, like I know handlers that are absolutely obsessed that the dog holds his indication for 30 seconds, and I'm going like, why? Like I remember I trained a dog for a guy who had a really nice lab before, and I didn't have any labs, so I got him a Malinois that was not really a bite dog, right? So really good searcher, and the dog was awesome at locating stuff, and I knew his lab from before. He after 10 seconds he starts looking for me, and he starts looking over his shoulder, and he breaks engagement with the source and all that kind of stuff. I said, yeah, but he finds stuff, and your lab, you could leave your lab sitting at a site at a find for a minute, and he would keep staring, but he couldn't find anything unless you pointed at it first. He wasn't a searcher. He wasn't a hunter. And it becomes sort of a cart before the horse. You know what I mean? Like I explain this to my handlers, and you can agree or disagree with that. To me, the final response, the trained final response, exists for one thing and one thing only. as far as purpose for the dog, we need to have a singular behavior that we can pay in training.
Mm-hmm.
If we would reward all the different things that the dogs do to tell us they found something, we would reward 10, 12, 20 different
Mm-hmm.
things.
Mm-hmm.
And that creates an inconsistency that
Mm-hmm.
just isn't productive, right? So to me, the indication, the final response is really just so that the dog has a consistent response when he finds odor that we can pay. But it is for us to pay. You worked with people that at times didn't want to pay. They just wanted to get the dog the hell away from what they found.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And I mean, you were in that system
Yep.
a little bit before, sort of that marking the dog away from the hide.
Mm-hmm.
There was still in training 90% of the time, it was a throw reward, and you wouldn't ever want to do that on deployment with explosive dogs. So there was no reward on deployment, and it was kind of demoralizing for the dogs. But also in that environment, how many times in the real settings, how many times did deferred indications get acknowledged, and the dog would be called away and he would be praised up and stuff like that? Because sometimes for the dog, it's just too hard to perform the trained response. When, you know, it's in transition indications, for example, I find a lot of times very few dogs are trained at that level of intensity that the dog still feels from the leftover from the apprehension to when he goes into the detection. They find it, they show you very clearly that they have acknowledged the odor, but they can't collect that level of intensity for the final response that they were taught. And in the real setting, it wouldn't be a question that would be called and marked with a light, chem light or whatever, and get the dog away from there, because we would be sure that that was a real find. But in the civilian world, you know, especially with narcotics, it used to be too that, you know, in the old days when they had aggressive response, it was very easy to tell that the dog had found something. Yeah. But now it's while the dog didn't sit, or my dog downs, or my dog stands and stares, or whatnot, right? Like you're working with sporting breeds some of the time. The pointers don't always want to sit. No. Their natural response is to stand. All right. So it's what if you go in court and says, well, you know, there's this many thousands of dogs that have a sitting response when they find target odor, but your dog stood, and you want us to believe that that was a valid indication. Well, that's just how my dog does it. Well, that becomes a very, you know, people are going to listen to that and go, it doesn't sound kosher to me, right? Where in the older days, when we said like the behavior change was the most significant factor of the find, right? But now, you know, I've seen on some of your little TikTok reels or whatever that, you know, it's become, unless the dog shows the trained final response, it can be challenged. Well, anything can be challenged, really, but I'm not sure that, like, we have dogs that will stand when it's very high because they're trying to get closer and reach for it, right? And then when it's middle face level, they sit, and when it's really low or under something, they down. That's just the way they do it. If you know your dog and you know that's how they do it, then that to me is 100% acceptable, because it matters more that they find stuff than what they do when they find stuff. And I think in the, you know, in Schützen, IPO, IGP, whatever they call it now, it would always be, this is my dog, this is me and my dog, and we're going to track, and the dog will indicate the article or retrieve. Back in the old days, it was more retrieving dogs. But everybody always tells you, well, don't tell the judge he will sit or down when he finds it. Right? Because if you see a very clear indication that the dog has found an article, you should respond to that. Right? And if you identify how he identifies the article, then you're kind of, if the dog takes a different position, then you're going to be penalized, right? And that's that's another thing I wanted to mention earlier in the certifications. There's a system out there that allots points to the way the dog performs, right? Minimum pass is 70, maximum points is 100. Again, lawyers don't know this, but if they knew that exists, I would challenge the 70-point dogs all the time, because some dogs that pass with 99, right? And it basically, if people are listening to that are not experts in our field, they will listen to that and says, well, the 70% dog barely made it because there are 99-point dogs. So that dog is obviously questionable, right? And that, to me, that's a huge, it's a huge downfall in a challengeable part. So I'm not sure why the obsession with certifications exists. I really don't. I know for departments, they like it because they can sort of say our dogs are certified under this and that. But it's a check mark. And people are, people want to get that check mark. And most of the evaluators are dog canine people themselves. They want to help the teams get that check mark. So the whole process, to me, is a little bit tainted. Right? And it's set up in a way that is, it makes it challengeable, right? Like, you should have in your training record, my dog didn't find it. That should be there. But and you will have calls when a partner calls you to a car. I think they're holding, go run your dog, right? And the dog doesn't find anything. That's very acceptable. It happens, right? And there may not be anything there. So that's just the way it happens. But in certification, when your dog runs a vehicle or he runs a room and he doesn't find anything, you're sweating bullets. Right? Now, in some systems, again, you must call this room or this car. You must say blank, or you must say reserve, and you can only reserve once. You can't run all the cars as often as you want and say this one, this one, this one, this one. And some of the systems have it that way, which is better, I think. But some systems basically have it. You got to do 7 cars, and you can't move from car 1 to car 2 unless you made a determination of what that car is all about. That to me is just a level of pressure that is unreasonable, and it makes it just makes it not very good. They also they don't let the hides age very long, so it's nothing like a guy that's been driving around with a bag of something in his car for hours. Right, he's handled the stuff. His fingers are tainted. He touches the door handles. The whole car stinks. And the dogs have much easier time finding that. But then, let's put the hides out. Okay, is it time yet? Is it time yet? Okay, let's go. Let's not waste any more time and just get on with it. But the odor hasn't really had a chance to breathe out of the the hiding spot, and then they don't want to do that, so they make it too easy. It's the whole standardization of this stuff is flawed in its concept. The fact too that there's no consensus among the different groups as far as what they want, right? Mm-hmm. It's like explosives. Like you and I work a lot of explosive dogs, especially mm-hmm. you in the latter part of your actual deployment career. Mm-hmm. There's so many odors. And if you have to present every odor in every environment that's spelled out, that's mm-hmm. insanity.
Yeah.
And it's unrealistic. That's not going to happen. In real world, a dog finds explosives, it ends there. Mm-hmm. You take the team out and it's over, right? In the military, of course, they deal with it one way or another, avoid mm-hmm. if it's a route clear. Mm-hmm. If they're assuming cachet, they will continue looking. Mm-hmm. But most of the time, if they find something that they didn't figure was there, they're going to get the hell out of there. Right? Yep. And deal with it in a destructive way, let's say. Yep. Right? Because they just don't want that to hurt anybody. But here in domestically, like every sporting event, every rock concert, every NASCAR race, every big event, every big sort of public event is searched by bomb dogs. Mm-hmm. And they never find anything. Mm-hmm. And nobody blows up. So everybody did a good job. Yeah. Right? It all changed. And you know that because you jumped into it a little bit later than I did. But when we went into the programs that were deliberately putting themselves into places where we knew there would be something.
Yep.
Right? The game changed. The training changed. And what we expected and how we rewarded, all that kind of stuff changed out of necessity because people got hurt when GWAT first started and they started using dogs a couple of years into that. Dogs were missing stuff. They were trained the traditional way that we trained a lot of dogs here in America. It's changed some since then. Obviously, that's 25 years ago now. But like I know one of the things I was always pulled in for was how are we going to get the dogs to be more reliable finding stuff. And we changed the training methodology because it was so much more important that the dog wouldn't miss stuff because people were coming right behind them. And, the results were devastating. We're not talking about sort of after action clears like SF had to do after villages were emptied. And then when they repopulated them, it was much more multiple finds and stuff like that. But we figured there wouldn't be anybody sitting with a cell phone up on the hill behind a couple of trees waiting for somebody to physically step into the structure and then kaplooey. So that kind of mindset, I think, is missing in the domestic explosive world.
Yeah.
And we want to have them. We want to make sure that these events are searched. Luckily, nobody has blown up, but are the dogs truly competent to really eliminate that threat if that threat was ever present?
And to highlight your point, imagine if U.S. commercial bomb dog teams had to go work in Israel. Totally different. Mm-hmm. Yeah. We could not get away with some of the stuff that happens in the commercial world now. And I'm the first to say, look, there are a number of really dedicated, good, hardworking commercial dog handlers. There's good companies out there. Yep. That said, me seeing it from the inside, even more so now, my feeling about it is it's a race to the bottom at the current moment. Companies are trying to go as cheap as they can. It actually starts off with this. Starts off with a client who doesn't know anything about the dogs other than they have a checklist that says we should have dogs here, either driven by insurance, whatever. Mm-hmm. Then you follow that up with they want to know how cheap can they get this. They have a security budget and they don't want to eat it up with the cost of dogs. So how cheap can I get this service? Well, then you then move out of the client to then the providers, the companies out there who desperately want contracts. They have to make a living. So it then becomes, well, how cheap can I do this? And then there's this bidding process that is typically going to go lower than higher.
Sure.
And then once whoever company gets it and they got it because it was a lower price, well, now the handler who's technically at the tip of the spear, the one who's at the most risk, is going to get paid a very low level compared to what they probably should be getting paid for potentially the risk they have. But then that highlights the point you just made. Well, nothing ever happens. We're just doing this because we're in a post 9/11 world. Yeah. We have to do this. And again, that goes back to the client's mentality who don't really take it seriously, because why should they? Nothing's blown up. So there isn't any fear in their mind that something's going to happen, but we have to do this so that way people who are attending the event feel safer when they see Johnny walking by with his crisp little polo on and a khaki pants and the harness that says "do not pet." So I already feel better because I see that person out there with their dog. Then the last part is, which is to me also one of the most critical parts, is because of the commercial world doesn't have mechanisms or a infrastructure in place that properly trains and educates and supports these canine handlers to be better educated, to get some of the more in-depth education that some might get by being in the military in the unit before, or being a cop before, where you get sometime exposure to other training things that just aren't available to the commercial world. So all those pieces together kind of create a recipe for we're going the wrong direction, only because something, to your point earlier, something bad hasn't happened yet. We haven't lived in a place like Israel or Ukraine or other places where you're having some of these things happen. And because there's no true operational threat, it gets treated at a much lower level than it should be. And
they're treated casually.
Yes.
You know what I mean? They're not really, there's no pucker factor.
Nope. And
if you don't have that, bomb work is probably not your thing.
Complacency gets in way too fast.
Yeah. And for me, like, I take this very, very seriously, that teams that I put out don't miss stuff. And I'm, with narcotics, it's one of those things, we don't know what we missed because nothing happens as a result. And with the bombs, I mean, there have been some things, were found, suspicious packages confirmed and that kind of stuff. But there hasn't really been that, at the Super Bowl, like if we didn't have that dog, 80,000 people would be dead. And that is maybe it's a grim way to look at things, but it's the only way to look at it. If you're called in to search for explosives in a venue where lots and lots of people are going to be, it is your responsibility to make sure that there's nothing there. And I don't know of a certification standard that ensures that. None. Yeah. Right? Yeah. Now, when you were working with, I don't know if you want to name the
no, you could, everybody knows. Yeah, I worked with the SEAL teams. Yeah.
Where you worked with NSW. Like, they weren't certified. Correct. They were not, right?
Nope.
They hired you because they figured he's not going to fuck this up, right? And they relied on the teams. And then, you also have guys that are a little bit have more work ethic, I would say, than some of the, especially civilian contractor types. And then they had real finds. They had real results. And that kind of confirms the the quality of the product. Nobody blew up, but you found stuff, right? And like I said, in narcotics, we don't know what we miss. So yes, the dogs find stuff, but sometimes it's stuff that you and I could find, right? It may not be that difficult to find with a dog. So it's, what do we do to make it better? You know, the people I worked with in the past and the people I work with now, they basically do this like in an operational setting. We make sure throughout schooling, throughout training, with maintenance training that I'm responsible for, that all the odors that are in play are regularly checked off, right? We have the luxury that we can get things made for us that are not so easily available and that are a little volatile to handle. So it's most teams don't really have a chance to train with it as much. But the ensuring that all the odors are checked off, that's maintenance training. You don't need to do that every day. Like we don't do every, Wednesday. We have all 15 of however many odors there are now, odors out there, and the dogs are going to go ding, 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 ding. We just make sure that in training, each odor is covered often enough that the dogs maintain a reliability on that odor. And then we set training problems that are the way the job would be done. Like sometimes guys, when, we haven't done this in a while, so we put out 4 hides. Okay, to me, that's already a little redundant, right? But sometimes there's one hide in a whole house and the dog searches. Sometimes alone, right? With a camera. Right? We don't even go in. So the only thing we know is that there's a hide in there. The dog doesn't know that. He assumes it because of the training we do. But it's a different way to test. If a dog can do that and he finds, let's say he finds TNT, right, or data sheet or something like that, but he also hits C4 on a regular basis in other hides, he's going to find C4 in there as well. That's the assumption, right? And that's also the reality. That's just the way it is. That's the way detection work works. Sometimes it has to be done when everybody is kitted up, everybody is looking like it's going to be an entry for biting. Like the transition it's not really a transition when they have to do it before. But pre-assault detection is important too.
Absolutely.
Very much important. Maybe a little bit less domestically. Overseas it was more so the case, but it is here as well, right? And if excuse me, I was talking all day already, so.
Oh yeah, no worries.
So we want to make sure that we show the operational picture to the dogs. Sometimes we do door sniffs during CQB. That's not how we do CQB all the time, but sometimes we set it up that way so that if we're worried about it because of the target, right, we can sort of, before we breach the dog checks the seam to make sure it's clear, at least as far as he can smell. Those are much more important things that validate a team than a certification. A staged, scripted pattern that is done with all kinds of dogs. They all, they all do the same. Like when we do the sort of the culmination test, right? Each dog gets something different. A different place, slightly variance of that. And that tests the decision making. And the scenario doesn't continue until the dog handler has made a decision based on what his dog is telling him. That's why he's there. team leaders aren't the most patient guys in the world. When the dog is supposed to check an area before they physically walk up to it or walk by it, is, hey, come on, buddy, time's ticking. What's your dog say? Like, what's going on, right? And then once the handler makes the decision, green light, and then it's good to go. And if he says not a chance, then that is taken at face value. To me, that's important. And like I said in my little comment on your post, I think we can do that a little bit. We can do, like, I don't think we should put the pressure of a gigantic certification test on a brand new team right out of the gate before we let them go and do stuff. If you want to, I think Broward County had a good system. They also have endlessly long schools, which is a benefit to their teams. But they would send dogs that were still in school to a call with a senior dog. The senior dog team would also go, and quick little discussion on site with the supervisor. Can the rookie do this? And if they felt that he probably could, they would use the rookie. Right? If they said, he's not ready for that yet, then the senior dog would do it. He was already there. It's, and when the dogs perform that way, they got a season on the road. Like, we have explosives that are dirty from being buried. We have explosives that are handled, mixed together. They're all in the same box. We have pure ones that nobody ever touches except with tongs or whatever. And they need to smell it all. Because real bomb makers are not that cautious and careful and sterile, right? So you need to make sure, I worked with one team, and they were getting ready for overseas and stuff, and they were kind of obsessed with route clears. So they did a ton of that, and unfortunately, the system didn't allow for them, or didn't have an environment where they could bury stuff for 2 or 3 days, right? So they had to kind of put it out, let it age, and then search. They couldn't leave it unattended, et cetera, et cetera. Those are some of the handicaps we face.
Yep.
So they tried to do the right thing by making little shovel pokes with, to put some disturbed earth along the route as well, to make sure the dogs would ignore that. But they did so much of it that it became a mix odor. So then I put them in an environment where the dogs were used to doing detection. And I said, your dogs are hitting on dirt. Oh, no, they're not. So I took a little shovel of dirt and took it in a kitchen and put it in a cabinet. All the dogs hit on it because it became such a prevalent common odor for the dogs. All that kind of stuff needs to be considered. And you can't consider that in a certification. Yeah, you really can't. You have to depend on the stuff that you did for months, the last few months. So I would like to see that, like, back in the day, like I said, when I first moved to Virginia, there was no certification, not for apprehension and not for detection. Everybody ran on their training records. And then the SOPs changed slightly, and they would let the dogs out of school do the first year on training records, and then they would do the certification the following year, and then annually after that. But they got a chance to go out and sort of get their feet wet. And handlers are nervous, and you have a dog. The dog is out of school. If he doesn't pass certification, you can't use him. So he can't get the all-important on-the-job training, because that's the only place where the dog will do a detection run on the side of the road in the rain at night. So that's just not done enough in training, right? So if I would almost prefer if they did away with it, certifications. But then you would need to have personnel that are diligent, like I am when I'm working dogs. And I have sort of an oversight, supervisory capacity that I keep track of that, as well as they do in their notes. I keep track of that by making sure that all the odors are always thought, that we set up difficult enough situations that the dogs are challenged properly, and the dogs are reliable. They have proven it, right?
Yep.
And that to me is more important than the piece of paper. And people train too much for the piece of paper. They don't train as much, especially when it comes close to certification. Nobody trains street work anymore. Everybody trains for certification. And I say the same thing about apprehension certification, because it's a little pattern that almost every half decent Schutzhund dog can pass.
Yep.
And that's not good enough.
No. And kind of to highlight a few things. So my time with Naval Special Warfare, we had a couple iterations of how we looked at teams to be mission ready. And I would say, like, first iterations were kind of crude in evaluation. Then at a certain point, we had we got a Navy chief who had been a dog handler before. And when he came in, his mindset was very different, and it matched what you and I are more or less talking about. He said, look, I'm not pushing anybody out on a deployment until we have spent proper time evaluating them. And our evaluation in some cases was multiple weeks long, because we needed to see, to the point you made, okay, let's see how they do over here in land warfare. Let's see how they do on VBSS. Let's see how they do in these various other critical areas where they could be asked to go deploy. We have to see it work. And to include the point you made earlier, handler decision making, because that handler is the interpreter of that tool, which is the dog, and they have to pass information up to the other operators to make decisions based off of that, team leader and everybody else. So we needed to see not only can the dog and handler work in these crazy environments that were set up, but also what decisions were they making, what info were they passing on, so that way the rest of the operation could be a success or a failure depending on what occurred.
And the handler's willingness to say, my dog can't do that.
Correct. 100% right. This is a limit. And we had more than a couple of those that would actually happen. Like, hey, they
have to happen, because there's some things that's not a dog call. That's correct. Like, bring in a robot. Let's go around it. Let's call in an airstrike or something like that. But my dog's not going to be able to do that to the point where I'm comfortable enough to say my guys are going to be safe. Right. And that's all. We're talking a lot about explosive detection. It's like, all these things are important. Look, if you want to talk about some other areas like human remains detection, a lot of people get into that because they want to help the civilians. They use Fluffy the pet to go out and help look for, there might be a buried body. Some of them are very good handlers, good dogs. Some of them are just do-gooders that want to be allowed to help, and their dogs are just no good. I remember my wife in Norway. She was in the civilian search and rescue system for many, many years. She's an instructor and an evaluator there, and also avalanche searching, because where she lived and was stationed has the highest incidence of avalanches anywhere in the world, right? So all their military dogs, when she was running the military platoon, canine platoon, all the dogs had to be search and rescue ready for the summer and avalanche ready for the wintertime. And they had to do other MP duties, like military police dog duties. But avalanche searching was really important. And, they would be flown onto a search field, because some of those avalanches are just gigantic. And there'd be a bunch of civilian system guys there. and they were very busy with the dogs, and they said, "Oh, we've checked there already," and then my wife would just sort of say, "Get them off the hill, get them out of here," and then they would search it with their dogs, and they would find people because they were professional. There was no like we're using dogs that are like just barely good enough, but make sure that there's no helicopter flying overhead because that will shut them down and they will not search effectively, et cetera, right? People that do that sort of stuff, do it on snowshoes, like avalanche stuff. Do it on snowshoes and see how your dog does. And a lot of them just never practice that. They go on the sort of prepped areas that are sort of run over with snowmobiles until they're packed enough. That also hides a little bit where they dug somebody down into the snow and so on. But they don't realize that sometimes you have to get there, and that's not going to be packed down with a snowmobile. There's going to be snow that's chest deep, and you have to use snowshoes that make a lot of noise, and it's awkward, and they don't walk and run the same way they normally do. There's all kinds of side factors that, like, you are familiar with from your explosive world. And again, that's where the civilian side and the professional side is slightly, different. There's a lot of companies that sort of advertise certified dogs. I've been contracted to do searches. They have never asked me if my dogs are certified because I was always referred to them by people that say, if Armin brings a dog, that dog is squared away. The end. Right? And that's just the way it is. My wife and a friend of mine took two of our dogs not too long ago and supplemented, national, federal agencies. And they would say that they didn't have their own dogs there. So they would, if they needed something checked, without question, they would just call and say, "Hey, Tazzy, will you run those cars, or will you check that luggage," or stuff like that. There was no question that they were. And then I think one of them, sort of as the gig was ending, and the dogs hadn't found anything, all of a sudden, early in the morning, they called my wife and they said, like, "You need to check these cars." So she checked the cars. The dog hit on something, indicated very clearly. She said, "There's something in that car." Okay. Turns out it was a federal agency's car that had 30 magazines in it, loaded magazines. So, of course, that's enough smokeless powder for a dog to hit on that. So I'm not sure if they wanted to set up cars that were blanks so that the car that they actually wanted to target was the middle car, or if they wanted to test whether the dog could really find something if something was there. We don't know, but the dog had no problem. And then my wife called the other handler and said, "Hey, run these cars. Tell me what your dog says." It was also one of our dogs, and did the same thing, smashed it, right? So everybody was super happy about that. And they came over, gave them challenge coins and blah, 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 to say, like, your dogs are squared away, et cetera, et cetera. That is more valuable than a piece of paper, right? And I had no problem with that, whether they tested our dogs or whether they just didn't realize that much ammunition in a car would set a dog off. Either way, it was a real find. It was a real scenario that my wife, at least, who was the first one that won it, had no idea that some would be there, right? And that's because I will not send a dog out that I don't believe can do the job. And no certification and no evaluator is going to know my dog better than me, even if, one of them was my personal dog and the other one was just a dog I trained. But like the team that the dog springs from is the ultimate authority on capability. And they should be much more involved in making sure that these dogs are squared away for the job that they're out there for. For me, like for narcotics dogs, The biggest issue is typically, like, unless you have a warrant or you get called in by the post office, which means you don't need a warrant because the post office tells you to run packages. The most significant one that dogs will do are roadside stops, roadside sniffs, right? And that's a big Fourth Amendment issue. Mm-hmm. And I say to everybody, if you're willing to step on somebody's Fourth Amendment rights, but you don't, and you trust your dog enough to do that, but you don't trust him enough to give him his toy, there's something wrong with you. There's something wrong with you as a team. You know what I mean? Like, to me, that's a very significant event. If the guy's committing a crime, then I think he should go to jail. But if your dog didn't truly find something and you're sort of wriggling your way into access so you can go check it yourself, that's not right. That's not what the dog is there for. And I'm pretty strict and stringent on that, like, watch your dog. Sometimes, now that we do primarily click-aways, I'm not a big fan of the verbal. It kind of sort of works. It works, but I've seen dogs respond to the yes word when people are having a conversation in the background. And it had nothing to do with what the dog was doing. It was just all of a sudden somebody said, a loud yes, and the dogs were a little confused by that. The clicker doesn't do that, except during one certification where the evaluator had a nervous thumb and kept clicking the damn pen constantly. He was following the teams around and said, "Stop doing that. It sounds like a clicker." Yeah. It was annoying me because I have noise issues. Everybody that's trained with me knows I have a little noise. Like, noises aggravate me, barking dogs aggravate me. That's really why I got into the specialty fields. But it's, I think if a department is small and they only have a couple of dogs, they should be part of a training group. And that training group as a whole should have a big amount of responsibility for whether that team is really capable of doing it. Even though the guy goes and he sort of, crossed fingers and toes, passes a certification, it's maybe not good enough to go out on the street. I don't know how many places do proper roadside training. Car on the road, pulled over, vehicle pulls up, like police vehicle pulls up behind, lights stay on the whole time. It's a safety thing, you know that yourself. And then while those strobes are going off, the dog is supposed to go search the car. You may try to remove passengers, and then somebody lips off at the handler. Your dog can't find shit, man. What are you even doing here? Agitating. A lot of them are dual purpose dogs. They don't take kindly to somebody acting like a jackass. They may completely forget about the narcotic search because they want to get into some different kind of action. But how much is that done? I know it's done. I'm not the only person that does that, but
it's not done nearly enough. That's the point. Like, when I travel around, I have to, like, beg, borrow, and steal to get them to get cars that we can actually do traffic stops with. And then I hit them with the curveball that more than likely, if they follow me at all, they should know better. But the first, to me, if I have my choice, 3 to 5 cars are going to be blanks, because I need to see that they can actually do a traffic stop without the indication, with nothing being there. Because, to the point you're also making, is the few times they've actually done it, or their only times they've ever done a single vehicle style search on the side of the road, is when they did it operationally. It was their first time doing it. Everything else up to that point has been the parking lot at the city or county fleet, or some rental car place that lets them go there to train. They've not seen or put themselves through enough repetitions where it is in that condition that they're going to face for real. And then the point you made about the dual purpose dog, the handlers who actually practice the traffic stop style as a felony stop, where it's a bite scenario to the car. So the dog's context generalization is like, this setup is a bite. And then they're like, no, we're doing dope right now, dog.
The driver or the occupants are jackasses. Right.
Correct.
Kind of actually, like, case in point, agency, I'm not going to name it, but they had a dog. They got through DOC. Got certified, no problem, right? Their jurisdiction had a major interstate highway going through it, a major north-south highway going through it, which means it has to do vehicle checks, right, on the side of the road. Well, this dog was terrified of cars whizzing by. He was just terrified of it. He wasn't searching anything. He was certified, but that's one job that we knew he would have to do on the job, but he couldn't do it despite his certification. And, the handler was a hard worker, not taking anything away from that sweet little dog, but terrified of traffic whizzing by, right? And where's that in the certification? It's not.
Correct.
Right? And it's, go back to my home country. To get your driver's license, you have to do a certain amount of training. And then the driver's test, you have to do night driving. You have to do Autobahn driving. You have to do all that kind of stuff because that's what you're going to do when you have a driver's license. Driving in a parking lot and parallel parking, you can avoid parallel parking for the rest of your life if you want to. But chances are you're never going to avoid interstate or anything like that. So that must be incorporated into the dog's training. How do we that's why I'm saying this whole minimum standard idea.
Yep.
I think I have no problem with a dog that the training cadre deems ready to do on-the-job training, right? For them to be out there and doing their job. And then learning as they go. And then in the following year or so, doing certification. But it should be much more by the way of odor recognition tests and then some kind of an operational lottery where if it's a multi-dog certification, there should be 7-8 scenarios set up. And the handler draws 2, right? Yes. And then once those scenarios are used up, then they're no longer available for the other dogs. So not everybody does the same. And that's, to me, a much better way to go. It doesn't take that much more time. It's a little more elaborate maybe in the setup, but it doesn't take any more time than to sit around in an old abandoned building and do rooms that are so stale, that have no human traffic in it at all for weeks and weeks and weeks. And then we go there for certification and new odor stands out of those rooms like a sore thumb. The dogs are going to trip into the odor. It's not that hard. Same with cars, rows of cars where the dogs that's a customs job. We don't do that.
Yes.
It's really not part of for a police officer's job to run 10 cars parked in a row.
Yep. Maybe if you're a bomb dog and you're
bomb dogs are different, but even we sometimes the surrounding agencies, they get called for school searches. That's gone down a lot now because we can't violate anybody's blah blah blah. But but that's the only time that dogs would run multiple cars in a parking lot, right?
Yeah.
Customs does that because the border crossing looks like a parking lot when they running dogs up and down, but they're not looking for personal use weight. They're looking for smuggle weight. Right?
What do you think about, because we brought this up a couple times now, obviously certifications want to check off that they've seen the dog identify odor X in the list of odors they have.
Yes.
What is your feeling on, okay, if that's what you want to do, then go do an ORT, an odor recognition test. Do your whatever your discipline is. And then that way, as the evaluator, they can check amongst all things the dog was able to, identify these items were the ones that had the target odor in it. And now we've checked off that list. Okay, I've seen your dog identify the odor. You didn't know where it was at. All the items look the same. There's proofing and distracting odors in the same space, in the same kind of lineups. And then, okay, now I've seen you've checked off that list. Now, to the point you were making earlier, let's go do your operational stuff. And I loved your example there of basically like a lottery system of what area you have, because that's what I do now in my seminars for training. I try to show the agencies, hey, yes, I understand you have some limitations on these environments that you have. Mm-hmm. However, you can be creative within that environment. What we can do is this handler is only going to get rooms 1, 2, and 3. The other handler comes in, may get rooms 4, 5, and 6. And I can take that area, just like you said. It's an investment of time in my setup because I'm going to have to set things up differently. But then when the handlers come up, they roll for me, I have dice. They roll the dice, and based on the dice number they get, that's the area they go search. Mm-hmm. And I do no more than 2 dog teams in a area that has been pre-designated as a search area. Yeah. And the second dog doesn't even get to come in there until about 30 minutes later, because I can just rotate. So I show them, here's your areas that you guys have. Now, even the ones with those old stale buildings, what I like to do there is I'll show up with bags of trash, bags mm-hmm. of clothes I've gotten a Goodwill for, and I throw that stuff all over that space. And then now the dogs are like, oh, wait a second. Mm-hmm. I've been here 50 times, but never had anybody brought in items of trash tossed around the room and so on and so forth. But to the point I think that we're both highlighting is they just get into a rut. And the rut has always been, we need to see your dog find odors. And the only way we know how to do this is to put these odors in these different kind of semi-operational looking setups, even though they're far from it. But it was a way to say, oh, look, we saw the dog find a couple odors on the cars. We saw the dog find the other odors in their rooms. And then the remaining odors were located in luggage or packages or whatever the thing that they go do. Where I think where we're aligned on this is like, okay, if you want to do your odor checklist, there's your odor recognition test. Now let's look at your operational readiness. And this isn't an overnight thing. It's going to take a couple days to do this. So therefore, we're not going to do a certification where 25 dogs are showing up in this day to go do certification. No, it's 5 or 6 dogs for one evaluator for that day for that area.
Yeah. But then, for example, let's say operationally, under what circumstances does a drug dog do rooms?
Yep, very low, unless they're like a search warrant team.
It's a search warrant, but what happens during a search warrant? There's all kinds of other people in there.
Oh,
you're rarely alone, right? What kind of circumstances does a dog do luggage? Hotel lobbies. Right? You can go into almost any hotel. Most hotels don't care at all if you bring a dog in. So go in there, put your Target suitcases in there, have somebody standing around to guard that, and then go in that hotel lobby and do it there, right? And vehicles should always be operational vehicles that are moving or movable. Like now with all passive dogs, like I'll use one of my cars sometimes, right? Yeah. If we don't have sort of a junker available that does where it doesn't matter. But that I think it's really important that's done. And like for drug dogs, it's okay for the handler to be as involved as they are. For bomb dogs, it's absolutely not. That drove me crazy when they first called me to say, like, look at our detection and tell us what you think, right? And I'm going, like, the guy's in full kit, right? Sometimes with a pack, sometimes not, but at least full kit. And he's walking into a building ahead of his dog backwards to show the dog where to sniff. Like, I looked at that, I said, like, what the hell is that? Like, how can he do that? You're making this person walk backwards into an area that you think has booby traps and explosives hidden in it. And you're making him go ahead of the tool that can tell him whether the explosives are there. Yep. Made no sense to me whatsoever. To me, the bomb dog needs to be able to work away from the handler. I do almost everything off leash. Yeah. Right. Sometimes vehicle searches we do with a long line or something like that. But that's about it. If it's a cachet thing, like when we know there's a bomb maker and we want to make sure that, finding hidden evidence and stuff like that, but there's enough movement in the house and there's no booby traps or anything like that, then you can maybe do a little bit more handler involved searching to make sure the dog doesn't miss anything. But most of the searching should be done much more independent. And I train the drug dogs the same way. That way, they hunt very independently and they basically argue with the handler. That's a big thing that I use. I don't know if you use a similar term. I want the dog to be willing to argue with the handler.
Yes.
If the dog smells something or wants to investigate something and the handler tries to egg him on, he says, "No, dumbass, I'm not done yet." You know what I mean? But especially dual purpose dogs who are also doing obedience, obedience can become sort of the handler wants me to come with him. Kind of thing, and that's not ideal. So I want to make sure that the dog is willing to just sort of do his own thing, even though he's on a leash. And as we get more into patterning and all that kind of stuff with the leash on, that's all fine and dandy. But the dog, I don't do any of that until I see that the dog, if the dog hits odor, he's going to try to force his way towards source, even though the handler is maybe trying. And I'm not doing the fake little, "Oh no, buddy, check here, check here." No. Just go around, and if the dog finds it and he kind of wants to yank you there, then I like seeing that, right? Where a lot of times, no, I wanted to search in this pattern. So like the dog is telling you something, and the dog has to be willing to tell him something. So it can't be that the dog has to be so mannerly when he's doing the search patterns that he's not willing to argue with the handler.
It's not my job to convince the dog there's odor there. It's the dog's job to convince me. And a lot of the times.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I was saying a lot of times they debate back and forth with their dog. They get this little standoff with each other of the dog going, "I don't know. Do you think it's there?" And the handler's like, "Oh, I don't know. Do you think it's there?" And then the handler and the dog get in this little goat rope with each other about whether something's there or not. And then neither one of them is confident about it. But like, I'm like you, where I'm like, no, I want that dog to basically fight me for it, kind of like tracking. When they caught a turn, oh yeah, we're on something now. I can tell because of whatever these things are about this dog that is predictable, repeatable, reliable, that there's odor here. That's what I'm going. That's why I know.
Yeah.
And go ahead.
And I insist that detailing does not ever happen except after a visible behavior change alert.
Correct.
Right. If the dog shows there's odor, but he can't quite pinpoint the strongest concentration by himself to the final, then you could say, help him out by making him check up a little bit.
Hey, we're a team. I can see stuff that you can't. Let's maybe get together here and collaborate, and maybe we find it together, you know.
But typically, I don't mind presenting and guiding. I don't like detailing unless the dog has shown me something already. By detailing, I mean very deliberate, pointing at specific things for them to smell and check. So that's my approach to it all. But back to the standards. I don't want to get too far off topic here all the time. But
on that, how do you feel about a double-blind component at some point within the testing process where, hey, no one's going with you. The outcome is you either tell me something's there or not there. And
I do that all the time. I take them into a building. I hide 3 or 4 hides. I even tell them how many there are. And I say, don't reward. I don't want you to fuck this up. Just go and search, come back, tell me where it is. And that's it.
Yeah.
Right.
And because it's an outcome driven, type of evaluation. You either got it or you didn't. Here is your space.
Theoretically, it's double blind if the handler doesn't know.
Correct.
Double blind is a silly word anyways, because it's always single blind because the dog never knows. Right?
Yes, correct.
Well, that's also not true, because I remember there was one particular handler in the training group that she always tried to get there early. Like we would say, training starts at 1, should be there at 12:30. Oh, I already hit all the dopes. Like after a couple of months, the dogs were so limited to what they were searching. Like we were in the school, went into a classroom, I hid it behind the blackboard, right? And the dog went in there, caught whiff of it, and then went to the closest desk and sat. Because she would never hide anywhere. There wasn't a door or a drawer or something like that. It was ridiculous. That's predictability of placement of hides, right?
Yeah, the context of where odor is going to be.
Don't hide by convenience. I always have like a mini tool with me. I open shit up. I unscrew stuff and screw it back on. Like you got to hide like a criminal.
Yes, exactly right.
You gotta hide it in a way that is meant not to be found easily.
Correct. My joke is, when have you ever found something in a filing cabinet? Because all you guys constantly do is hide shit in a filing cabinet, which in almost all circumstances is not going to be where it's at. And what you're saying is, like I try to share to them, hey, be creative. Hide something like someone's trying to get it past you. That's what they're going to do. They're not going to stick it in the door seam right here between the cabinet or the car door, A pillar, B pillar, whatever. They're not going to do that. So let's just invest. Let's prioritize what our goal is.
Yeah. When I moved here, like I had sort of a international reputation, but the local cops didn't really know who I was. And then somebody told them about me. They were at a seminar and somebody knew my name. And somebody said, the guy said, I think he lives near Charlottesville somewhere. So they looked me up and found me. So they invited me out for training. So I said, sure, and I decoyed for them and stuff like that. And then we did narcotics. And they gave me the narcotics and said, will you hide that for us so we don't know where it is? I said, sure, no problem. But nothing over like counter height. I'm going, do the criminals know that?
Yeah.
Because I'll hide this shit anywhere. Ceilings, floor tiles, floor drains, it doesn't matter. I'll hide wherever. I make stickers. I came up with that. I think a lot of people are using it now. But I have, in almost all my odor boxes, I have those Kids Foamy stickers. Some of them have different shapes. I just buy the sheets. They're sort of foamy sheets about this big, and they have sort of an adhesive back. And we don't use it often enough for the dogs to get used to the adhesive. But they soak up odor really, really well. And you can stick them, have different colors. You can stick them on a blank wall. You can stick them on the side of a van, like a panel van, right? It's all white. And there's a white sticker on there. But most dogs will completely not search that blank area, right? Same with walls. Walls that are just like there's not a single object there for them to investigate. They just zone out and go to the next corner until they continue. So flat floors, exactly the same. So we use the stickers, the odor-soaked stickers, for them to basically search everywhere. The dog should never have a preconceived idea where it could be. He should always say, my nose tells me where it is. That's the way it needs to be.
The nose knows.
The nose knows. That's it. And the handlers, that's the other thing. You probably noticed that as well. A brand new handler works his dog. They don't watch their dog. They go into a room, they're supposed to search, and they're not watching their dog at all because their eyes are looking for, like, where could it be hidden, right? Yeah. They don't keep your eye on the dog. The dog will tell you where it is. That's kind of his job. And he will be able to find it in a way that you can never even imagine where it could be. And once you start realizing that, you're going to work the dog properly and you're going to work the dog more effectively.
Yep.
So,
And for those, watching and listening, food for thought that you and I are basically trying to allude to for people here is certification. Because of the way it's been done and the history behind it, people keep training for that as a standard. And then that is their gate door to get out to the real world. And what we're trying to advocate for is look at this in a much bigger, deeper way. And how about addressing what you actually do and looking at that, evaluating that as both the handler and the team. Does the handler make a good decision? Do they deploy in the right way? That's advantageous for whatever they're doing. But if you're looking for starting off, let's going back to like how we start. If you want to start odor recognition test, good. Knock yourself out. Does the dog know the odor? It's okay. Good. We moved that past that point. Now let's go see you do your job in the areas that you're expected to go do it. So like you said, if you're a traffic cop and you're on patrol, you're going to do lots of traffic stops. So I need to see you do lots of that. I'll still look at you doing some rooms and some other stuff, but my heavier critical eye is probably going to be, I need to see multiple versions of you doing a traffic stop and evaluate the overall process. And within this process is, like we said, handler decision-making, followed by nobody being with you, double blind. You go do your thing, come back, let us know. And the totality of this gives us a better measure than the typical certifications out there. And what you also highlighted, which came from our special forces world, is, hey, maybe we need to have more of a OJT, FTO period where you're out there doing it. And you highlighted that. And I know for a fact, and I don't know the exact details, but LAPD, one of the biggest agencies in the United States, that's what they do. Their handlers go through school. And like you said, they show up at different types of calls. And depending on how this call is, the senior trainer or handler, whoever's there, starts making a decision. Okay, this is a good call for the new guy. Let's go put them out on the ground, see how they do, get their feet wet, get some experience in the real world conditions that we, unfortunately, as everybody highlights, of course, we have a very hard time replicating a real world type of call or environment because of that. So these gives opportunities. So you can take big agencies like you listed Broward, I'm listing LA. Clearly, we can do this, but there's this fear within the system that, oh my gosh, how dare you deploy with a uncertified team? And I laugh because when I first kind of took on Stratus Canine, that's what I did with a number of teams. Like I let them go work job sites under our supervision, even if they didn't have that piece of paper with them, because first thing we said was, hey, look, to our client, look, we're going to have teams out here. Some teams are going to have a national level piece of paper. Other ones are going to be operational without that, but they're under our direct supervision. Nobody had a problem with that. They were like, great, that's
look, your NSW teams arguably have more real world fines than any agency in the country, right? Including who I work for, but it's because of the target-rich environment. But the dogs are very clearly validated by real-world success, right? Because they were supervised by somebody who understands the game and raised the bar because he was preparing teams to go into situations where it mattered 100%. There is no minimum standard that's good enough anymore when lives are on the line. It must be as close to perfect as you can get it. And I think it should be that way to deal with Fourth Amendment issues. And it certainly should be that way with all bomb issues. If you're called out to search a venue to make sure that there's no deadly threat, you better take that seriously, because even though people don't find so much here in the U.S., speaks well for our national security in a way. But on the other hand, it's sooner or later, I don't want it to happen, but sooner or later it will happen. Because we have enough crazies, and there's already been some bombings that were more personal bombings and stuff like that. And the incidents of teams encountering explosives, real world is the frequency is going up. Let's say it that way.
Yeah, it's only going to increase. It's not going to decrease. And the tactics used is where it's going to come into play. And I think you and I can probably both agree on this too. It'll be a mixture of that person who's going to try to get in with something they can throw over a fence or toss, and then there's this newer elaborate threat that's going to be that finally it's getting some attention in the commercial world. But not nearly enough. But I know there's no doubt in my mind, in 5 years or less, there's going to be drone attacks at people. Are going to get the drones are too easy to get. Someone's just going to put a payload on it or have 3 or 4 of them and just fly them into the plane. They don't even have to deal with security at that point.
Yeah.
Now, the only places that are really addressing that type, which is not a dog issue, but they're addressing that, are your like higher level things like the FIFA final, the Super Bowl, things like that. But these events, whether it be festivals or
sporting
music events or whatever, someone's just going to be pissed off and go, you know what? I got this cheap DJI drone that's sitting at home. I can put a little payload on this, fly, and then all of a sudden it's a different kind of thing. But the dogs are still going to get involved in that, because once the initial bad stuff happens, we still need to make sure the scene's clear. We still need to have a way to get people in, out, look for anything else. Did they only fly a drone in, or did they also put something else out that just didn't detonate yet? So dog handlers are going to have to be prepared, and specifically commercial and law enforcement.
Look at Boston Marathon.
Yes, exactly.
That area was searched by bomb dogs. They just were not very good bomb dogs.
And I think, if I'm not mistaken, because I don't know for sure, but I want to say dogs swept the area, and then those guys came in, and then the bag was placed, and then there was a short time delay.
There could have been a window when it was placed after a sweep was done, right? So that's that's one of those things. The same thing goes with the body worn stuff, and I know. Friend of mine has some dogs working in a big stadium, football stadium, that are permanently there, and then they also hire a contractor. I don't want to throw names out there because I piss too many people off as it is, but so those contractors supposedly have dogs that are able to do the airborne stuff, and the state police in that area decides to every once in a while test the dogs, right? Especially with body-worn stuff. And the dogs miss it all. The only dogs that found it was, and the dogs that my buddy put in there, they're not body-worn trained. But one of the dogs followed somebody, engaged them, and wanted to kind of hop up to investigate closer. And the handler was about to kind of say, like, what the fuck are you doing, dog? Right? And the trooper stepped over. He says, he's doing exactly what he's supposed to do. This guy's carrying stuff. Right? But there's a lot of self-fulfilling geniuses out there, right? For example, since we're talking about certifications, I do not like it when vendors certify the dogs they sell. Yep. A lot of times the dogs are certified before the handler ever gets them, and nobody ever saw that certification. That's I've done plenty of handler schools and put lots of dogs in the street. I let the agency pick whatever national standard they want to do. We make sure that the dogs are ready to pass that, and we bring in an evaluator, judge, master trainer, whatever the title is of the day, and they do it. We set it all up, but whatever system that they choose to certify under, I will not certify a dog I sell. I'm not going to do it, right? That's that's way too self-serving as far as I'm concerned. It becomes a moneymaker. Shouldn't be allowed.
Nope. Or just be smart. Have a witness, have somebody who has nothing to do with this, like you said earlier, be there and say, I saw these things occur.
But if the certification is done in a house where all the dogs are training all the time, and the target materials are the same dresser, years, they never even get removed, Sometimes they're refreshed, but they never even get removed. And the dog's find in that dresser every time, and that's where the certification is. Come on. That's just not right. So when it comes to the certification, it's only as good as the people involved and the people doing it. And I'm not talking purely the organizations that are offering the certifications. I'm talking about everybody. Because chances are most of the time the evaluator does not set things up. They come in and the training group, if it's a big enough department, the canine unit sets it all up. They find the cars, they find a building with the rooms, they set everything up. They supply the materials, right? Like with bombs, for example, I'm very, very particular that our dogs are constantly exposed to different explosives. Not just different odors, different batches of explosives that are being made, right? And the lab does like an annual, I think it's once a year, maybe twice a year, where they do sort of an all agency, all invite kind of thing. They make the stuff brand new in the lab and they put it all out, and the teams come from all over and sort of test themselves a little bit. The people that show up to that, those are valid people, because they wouldn't do that and go into the blind lion's den and try that out unless they had faith in their dogs. And our dogs are always in the top 2-3% of all the dogs that show up. And our dogs are dual purpose dogs. So that's an additional difficulty that those dogs face. But it's if you go somewhere to do explosive certification, and it's explosives that come from an area, and they're explosives that you have never trained on, right? So one of the reasons that I get so many European teams come over and work with me, because they know their stuff. They're really very handicapped with what they're allowed to use. So they use lab created, not explosives, but you know what I'm talking about. I don't want to.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I've seen it.
I don't want to call it pseudo. It's replica materials.
Correct.
For lack of a better word.
It's components thereof or rendered safe enough because of some kind of
or similar like spectrograph signatures and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But they're non-explosives. Some of those training aids are just non-explosives. So they are a little bit limited. And if they do have any real stuff available, like from when they work with their breaches and whatnot, they do get on real explosives, but it's really tightly regulated and controlled there. So they like coming over. And a lot of times the first few days, the dogs really struggle with our stuff. Right. And then the next time they come, well, we have some new stuff. It's the same materials, but it's new stuff again. And the dogs benefit from that. Anytime I go anywhere with a bomb dog that I train, my personal dogs or whatever, and somebody has explosives there, I'm going to ask them to put a couple of hides out, because I want my dogs to have as many different types of explosives, batches of explosives in his head as he possibly can. There's a commonality of signature, of course, with C4 and stuff like that. But there are considerable differences that you do see from. It's a little different civilian and military already, right? Yeah. Military dynamite and civilian dynamite are completely different explosives. It's completely different. So you have to be able to train on all that kind of stuff in as many different kinds as you possibly can get your hands on.
No, I love that you're highlighting the importance of generalization, because there's that thought process that kind of gets spread around within the communities that, if your dog's trained on this chemical, it'll hit it no matter if it exists. That's not true. And that's
not true for real either. That's the point. No. It's not just for the replicas. It's also for real stuff.
Everything.
So, and I go back to, an analogy I came up with in tracking. Like, have you ever read my tracking article? The colored.
It's been some years, but I did remember reading one of your ones from a while ago. You
read the colored dot concept? So what I try to explain to people
Not
is
that I remember anyway.
Yeah, that like for a dog, a footstep creates an image in their head, like one of those old color blindness charts with all the different colored dots, right? And of course, if there's a red dot, the dog can follow the red dot quite easily, right? But if he hasn't memorized, and I just picked the number 20, like if he hasn't memorized or identified all 20 dots, if he follows the red one and all of a sudden the red one disappears for whatever reason, like change of direction, change of wind, change of surface, right? All of a sudden the red dot is gone. That dog's lost. Mm-hmm. But the dog that takes the time to really identify all 20 dots and then compares every footstep, 20, now there's a turn, there's nothing here, 19 are here, I'm going to go with the 19, right? Mm-hmm. And I think it's the same with explosives. C4, for example, is a very smelly explosive. Mm-hmm. I can find it. If it's a big block, you can put it somewhere, I can find it. It's not a problem, right? Mm-hmm. So, but the dog is probably going to also pick up colored dots. And C4 gives off a very strong, odor that we can even smell, and that may be a red dot and a green dot and a blue dot, right? But there's 17 other dots that are always there, but because those 3 are overwhelming, he may not bother to learn the other ones.
Yep, correct.
And the dogs that learn the 20 dots of C4, they will probably do all C4. And the only way you can do that is by showing them different types of C4. So he analyzes the consistency of the 20 dots that are there all the time, right? Even if something is a little different. Hey, who added purple, right? That doesn't matter. If 20 of them are there, the 20 that are C4 distinctively, he's going to be able to do that. And the only way, like I said, you can train that is by showing them different batches of the same explosive so that they can identify the commonality. It's not a generalization. It's identification of a consistent commonality that never changes, right?
Yeah.
Because the C4 you train on, the red dot may be a plasticizer that another manufacturer doesn't use, and now you're screwed if they only work on the red dot, right? So I have this idea that dogs get mental images of what they smell, right? And because we are mainly visually orientated, we have the saying, seeing is believing, right?
Yeah.
Well, dogs are macrosomatic. For them, smelling is believing. So we need to sort of understand that, like, the dog identifies a complete scent picture the way we identify a picture when it's shown to us. And the longer we look at it, the more details we pick out about the picture we see, and the longer and more often the dog smells the materials he's supposed to find, the more unique individual components of the scent picture he will identify on the target odors as well. That's really, really important, and I don't think it's done enough.
Completely. No, it's not. And then you add reinforcement history to the red dot, like you're talking about.
Yeah.
That's what they think it exists. It's just the red dot. I've been paid hundreds and maybe thousands of times.
The red dot may be real, but sometimes it's not there, and it disappears or whatever. And that's that only comes with concentration and spending a lot of time identifying the material or the track footstep or whatever. If it's done superficially, and there's a lot of strong smelling odors that, or if you overstrain with like a giant quantity, something about that smacks you in the face. And the nuances and the small details that make up the complete picture are completely lost. Right?
Yep.
In tracking, I always go like, if you identify a person that you're following, it says he's wearing a red baseball hat. Well, all he has to do is hide in a crowd of people that all wear red baseball hats. Or ditch the red baseball hat. Either way, that you would have no way to. There's actually a funny scene in the movie The Fugitive when he barely escapes the marshals, right? From that, I think he was visiting somebody in prison or something like that, and he barely gets out of there, and then he blends into the St. Patty's they parade by picking on
puts the
a
hat
green
on
little derby hat out of the garbage and puts it on. And now he's walking with thousands of other people wearing red derbies. And all of a sudden, how do you pick out like Harrison Ford with his, do you even remember his coat? After you see that
he had
many,
that military jacket,
the heavy overcoat, and that's kind of the same thing, right? If all of a sudden it all blends together because that one characteristic that you picked out no longer matters. It's no longer a clear identifier. It's the same with scent work. So,
for sure,
I'm not for national certifications. I'm not for state-run certifications because any of the evaluations of a dog's capabilities are only as good as the people administering it. And as soon as you start going government, it's already messed up. Like there's too many cooks stirring that pot, and it's just not going to work. It needs to be experts in the industry that are involved. I mean, Frank Scombra.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
So he has tried to go around and sort of do evaluations for people, not necessarily for certifications, but just to evaluate their programs. And I think that's okay, but it doesn't need to be put egg on people's face either. It needs to just be like one of the things that the people I work with do is they use all real missions. And maybe it involved a dog years ago, maybe it was pre-dog. And we basically reenact that very same mission as an FMP, putting a dog problem into it, right? And that is sort of the operational test for handler and dog. And it involves the way they really deploy, the way the dogs are really used, and stuff that they're supposed to find. And I'm talking about the detection portion of it. But that I think should be done on a local level, police level as well, that they do it the way it really happens. Roadside stops with cars going by and the police, the stopping vehicle, keeping their lights on and so on. The dog has to come out and, deal with all the distractions and still go to work. It's, you probably get the same, or you see the same kind of posts on the Leo board or canine handler board and whatnot. And it's always like, my dog does great in training, but he sucks on the street. And and a lot of it is like, well, he passed certification. Why? Because it looks just like training. But you're not trained. Then if that's the reality, then you're training for certification and you're not training for the street. You need to train the things you have to do at work. And if that's not done, look, I'm not a cop. Never said I was a cop. I was not military either. I handled bomb and drug dogs back in the late 80s, 87. And they were not my dogs. They were dogs. I was a security guard, and I handled first, before I got my own outfit, I handled dogs for a company. And some of them were better and some of them weren't very good at all, right? You just have to work with whatever they assign you. So you learn a few things. Like we did sporting events, hockey games, things like that. We did like big trucking companies, make sure the employees weren't using stuff, right? Searching the trucks, but also searching their locker rooms and stuff like that. We did some correctional facilities looking for that particular contraband. And you start realizing when you handle a couple of different dogs, like this dog is really good at searching. And this dog doesn't search at all. Like if I don't show him where to sniff, he has no idea what his job is even. But it opens your eyes about what They're all obviously past some kind of a standard for them to be able to send them out. But the standard was obviously not good enough for the dogs to actually do what they're supposed to do. And I think that needs to change, whether it's done as a certification. I would much rather it be done as like you could do it all in-house with training records and then some supervision. It's just like, not to get sidetracked to the apprehension, but to me, if you're running a school and your dog outs whenever you need to out him, not that the verbal out is necessarily the be all and the end all, but whatever. But in training, you do a scenario, you decide that you out the dog out's fine, right? But then in certification, with all the stress and all that kind of stuff going on, the dog just doesn't out. Well, what's more telling of what the dog will do for real? The stuff that he's been doing, the months and months and months you watched him, or the stuff he did that one day?
Yeah.
With the shitty decoy that kind of messed it all up. Like say you have a real fast dog and he's usually pretty good if it's short distance or if it's a good decoy. But then at certification, it's some flump who goes face plant and the dog gets rolled over. The dog is pissed off and he's less likely to out. Right? There's all kinds of factors that go into that. It's, I think, observation over longer periods of time. Yeah. And good training records are way more validating than a piece of paper that happens one day and a dog can have a great day and a dog can have a bad day. And
the courts have backed that up.
Yeah. And another example from Avalanche, right? Because this is like the dogs need to be out there to find stuff. So that's one of the reasons evaluators typically don't want to fail dogs, right? So I was at an Avalanche certification in Norway, and young kid, inexperienced, because the platoon that my wife was working was primarily made up of conscripts, right? Mandatory duty soldiers. They just picked military police canine as their military occupation. So the dog goes out in a search area that's staked off with those red, you probably saw them in Switzerland, those red plastic sticks that they have on the side of the road so that you can see where the edges are, even though the snow is as high as the house. So they use those to stake out the area that the dog was supposed to search. So the dog goes in and there's two victims at different depth. I think one was 2 meters deep and the other one's like 3 meters deep or something like that. Really deep snow, so they already had to sled the team in. Then the handler had to get off the sled with his dog with snowshoes and carrying what he would normally carry on a real search. So he humped in there and started searching. And I got in a bit of an argument with a evaluator the day before, and I was told by my significant other that I should button it. But the guy basically gave instructions the day before of what this is going to look like, because we started very early in the morning. And he said, like, I don't want the handlers to have a toy. And I don't want the dogs to get paid. And I go, why not? Well, this is supposed to be like real world. And I'm going, like, you think that the handler wouldn't have a toy if he was really searching for a buried victim? What if he loses it? I said, then one of the other guys will have one. Like, what is the point of making the handler not be able to reward his dog? Or he could just tell him he's a good boy. I'm going, that makes no fucking sense to me whatsoever. It just doesn't make any sense, right? So the kid goes out there. He's obviously nervous, right? Because he's being tested. And the dog goes out and smashes it, right? Just finds both victims, very efficient, super dog. Knew his job for sure. no reward. So he's getting frustrated. He's starting to hop around, looking at his handler. Where's my toy? Where's my toy? Kind of thing. Mm-hmm. So he ends up, as he's leaving the field, he goes by one of those stupid red poles, and the dog grabs one of those poles, right? And now the handler's trying to out him, but he's frustrated. He's thrashing that pole around. The kid's on snowshoes. It was a giant Charlie Foxtrot. So he got it away from him once, and then the dog kind of jumped backwards as he was leaving. He was on snowshoes, grabbed it again, and then he wouldn't out it anymore. So the idiot evaluator failed the team. So I said to him, I said, these dogs search for real missing people, right? Now that you didn't certify him, he's not allowed to go out there and find somebody's loved one who's buried under snow. Like, how ridiculous is that? And the same thing goes, like if a dog goes through a good school and is a squared away dog, but he sits, false sits, right? Mm-hmm. And the handler recognizes it as a false sit. But the evaluator, and I've seen this done plenty of times, says that's a miss, a fail, right? And he has a couple of them, and the dog is out. Well, now that dog's not going to be allowed to go out there and get shitty drugs off the street until he does a certification again, right? I saw another one where it was a car interior search, which to me is ridiculous anyways. I think that should be done. Like, we shouldn't even be allowed to go in a car unless we found something on the outside, right? Unless we have consent, and then I don't need the dog so much. Unless it's hidden compartment interdiction. Yeah. And that should be a separate thing anyways. But anyways, in this certification, interior fine. So the dog is in there. He's searching, and he's scratching at the console or sitting at the console, right? And the handler says it's in the console. And he says, nope. Says, well, I'm pretty sure my dog found it, right? So he takes him out. So the console goes here like this, right? And it was stuffed in the cigarette lighter outlet, the 12-volt outlet, in the front of the console. But it was not inside the console. So he called it a miss. Like, that's the problem with evaluators. It just becomes, sometimes it becomes a pissing match. Mm-hmm. I sometimes don't even go to these things with dogs that I've trained because some people, I don't know why, but they just don't like me. And then, the handler basically has a bullseye on his back because they're associated with me. So I'd rather not burden them with that. But my point is, there's egos involved, there's personalities involved, and it's not, it's not a solid system. That's for sure. Yeah, and I think it lacks a lot. It really does.
It's to me, it's due for review. It's due for some evolution. It's due for some changes, because we can all point to the industry and say, look at these advances that have occurred. Yeah. Look at how we work the dogs are different now. But yet the standard in which we are looking at or judging these teams has not evolved at the same level or pace, or in some ways at all, to what is happening now. And that's the part that has to be looked at. And organizations have to look at making changes, but they're afraid to make changes, because if they make changes and members drop because they don't want to do that, because it's a change. Not even that it's hard. It's just because it's change now. And we all know how much the industry loves any kind of change whatsoever. So then the driving factor becomes, it's about a financial decision, not a decision based on what's best for the industry. And
the power of the organizations and the so-called master trainers. I think that term is stupid anyways, because it just means evaluator, but people see the word master, and the person all of a sudden becomes a guru. My question was at the very beginning to you, and it was also on your post. Why do we even need it? Most of the time, if the dog is challenged in court, not for procedure, but for capability, beyond the certification, they're going to ask for training records anyways.
Every single time.
So the training records, especially if you walk in with a stack like that one little piece of paper certification means nothing compared to the stack of records of real world fines, because your actual deployment notes go in there as well, and your training notes. That should be the standard. And the training records, if there's not a lot of deployment records available yet, the training records should be not done in isolation.
Yeah,
that's an absolute must. There should be a pair of eyes, and I'm a bit of a fanatic. I get that, but if there's a dog working, I can't sit down and I can't talk to somebody over here when there's a dog working.
Yes.
I gotta watch what the dog is doing. But a lot of times, this is a big peeve of mine. I'm the civilian, and I pay more attention to the training than the officers do. They're talking, they're acting not like cops. And like for us, when we're doing, tactical movements, stack ups, exterior stacks and stuff like that, I need guys to look intense and energetic and ready to go, because that stims the dogs, and we need to teach them how to harness that stim, not just bubble over and be jackasses, right?
Yep.
But then there's a couple of guys that are just standing there. They're not really, pointing. They're not carrying rifles. They're not putting the kit on. And like you see the little dot on my head, that's from helmet rub. I used to pad on my helmet, and when it's sweaty, I kind of shift it all the time, and it rubs my head. But it's like, act professional when you're training. I don't like it when people don't wear uniforms. I used to accept that when I was sort of the newcomer. It wasn't for me to decide it. But once I started running the training group and doing the schools and stuff like that, when you come to training, you dress right.
Everything.
Right? There was a videotape again this morning somebody sent me where like handlers about ready to send a dog on a fleeing subject, right? And a backup officer jumps out of the car and jumps to very close to the thing. The dog just turns around and latches onto the guy. Why? Because they just don't see that enough. They don't like discriminate the uniform, because either people work them in uniform or nobody wears uniform, so that the dog can learn it as a signal. So it's in the detection world, it's not something to phone in, I believe. It's your job, and it's an important part of your job. And I think certifications have sort of run their course. I think we need to come up with something better. And I think there needs to be almost a system that basically says A, B, C, D needs to be done in order for that dog to go on the street. And certification doesn't need to be one of them.
Correct.
They need to have, like, I don't mind an auto recognition test just to make sure that they can do all the stuff. But, and if you want to go and do a certification type stuff where you go out, then it should be much more scenario based. But I don't think that's even necessary. I think if you do the scenario based stuff in training, it becomes much more valuable and realistic for the dogs, because it's just sprung on them. It's not something that they can like prepare for as such. And it's more real, and the handlers are, in a proper work environment. But for that, you also need cooperating officers. It's not like, it's not my turn yet. I'm having a coffee. Like, no, like at real searches, there will be other cops, which means I need other cops. And if you're not willing to do that, then you're not really training with us. You're not helping in training. The training of a K9 team requires that other officers are present, consistently present. They need to be there all the time, because nothing that you do in the real world, you do completely alone.
Nope.
You don't show up by yourself.
Or
and then
very rarely, unless you're that agency that's out in the boonies or something. But
again, sort of the free air sniff is very, very questionable if it's the stopping officer doing it.
Sure. Yep.
Because then it's not a free air search. Then it's a search. Right?
Yeah. Yeah, because there's the legalities
because you're not now
talk about that.
It doesn't happen during the course of a routine traffic stop. Mm-hmm. You're delaying the traffic stop by running the dog around, and that's
absolutely
that's going to get tossed. Well,
for sure.
Maybe in some small towns it's not yet, but it's going to come. So, like I said, there needs to be a little bit more attention to detail, attention to training records, and creativity in training. So it's not just always like we want to make sure that there's found cocaine, found meth, found heroin, and that's it. It's
desk drawer, filing cabinet, gas cap. Okay, training's done today. Yeah,
I have a check on all the odors and I'm done. But that's like I had a handler in school once, and I usually the first week I don't make them do anything because they're overwhelmed by having a dog on a leash, and then by week 2 I want them to write training notes, and then I look over their notes to say, hey, you should word that different, or you should be more detailed, et cetera, et cetera. Mm-hmm. So I opened this one guy's training book, and it said every day, it said, Remco done good today. That was his dog's name, right? I'm going like, that's ridiculous. What is that supposed to say? It doesn't say anything about what you did. And like, what kind of a statement is that? And you're going to go into court with that? Like, what the hell is that?
Yeah.
Remco done good today.
Today, the judge will accept that. That's good.
Yeah. Well, if he done good all the time,
if you say so, I mean, come on.
If he done good, he must have done good on the street. So, no, I think it's time for, I think for agencies and canine groups and handlers to police themselves.
Yes. And
raise the standard from what's been accepted for far too long, as far as I'm concerned, to something that is actually professional. Because to be quite honest, like that to me goes for almost all the certification, all the other skills as well. It's not professional. It's sloppy. Yep. It's bare minimum, and that's just not good enough.
I totally agree. Absolutely agree.
It's it needs to be done better. And this whole you're not allowed to touch your dog. You really think I'm going to bring my dog out of the car and not have a hold of him? Yeah. Right? Like, same with the verbal out. I tell people we should have a verbal out. That the verbal out is a great way to save your dog's life or save him, protect him from injury. It's not something to get him off a suspect. It was it's more tactical. It's not more tactical. Like because there's way too many moving parts when you're arresting a suspect, and there's backup officers around, and you're around, and maybe civilians around, that I want to do a distant, like, verbal out and make him come back to me. I would do that if a guy pulls a knife and starts stabbing my dog. I want him out of there. Right? That's when the verbal out is useful. But the rest of the time, go up and do a removal. But to me, if you were to do a removal certification, if you remove him and that dog takes a rebite, you're done. You fail. Because that's you, and you know what I mean? That needs to be. And decision-making. Should I even send my dog? A guy's shooting at you. You should probably not send him. But way too many certifications still have gunshots in there.
Oh, yeah. Forgot about that. Yeah.
Or remember, how about the one where the guy runs away in BDUs and unloads a complete revolver?
Oh man, no. And
when they do competitions, how is this for a farce? When they do competition, when they do the call off, the dog is pursuing, right? And it's typically a running call off, so the guy doesn't stop. But you're not allowed to call him off until he's traveled a certain distance. So they put up like a little light thing, 2 lights. And the dog is sent, and then when the light changes, then you can call the dog. Let's indoctrinate our handlers to look at something else other than the dog and suspect. Like, it makes no sense to me. There's so many things in certifications that make no sense to me. that, like, I'm glad I work in the environment that I do, because we do FMP type evaluations, and it's way, way, way better. Most of the MEDAL skills, the mission essential task list skills, should be included in the FMP somehow, and that tests everything. That doesn't mean that the explosive part needs to be tested 18 times, right?
Yeah.
He found explosives in the real world.
Now let's go see.
Yeah.
Yep. And for those listening,
chill out.
FMP stands for a full mission profile. Yes. So that just means they're doing it exactly how they're supposed to do it if they were on the operation.
Correct.
So, no, I mean, Armin, this is, we don't catch up enough. I really enjoyed just the engagement you had on the social media part, but now taking it to this point where we got to talk and let other people hear just how we think, how we feel. They can take it, leave it. It doesn't matter. But if we can do anything that helps promote or instigate change the right direction, then these conversations are always worth it.
Raise the bar.
And it's what it needs to, we got to raise the bar and do better.
A lot of times I don't engage on social media posts because no matter what you say, there's always going to be 15 people arguing or having a better idea or whatever. So I'm not saying that I have all the answers for this certification dilemma, but something needs to change. And I think it needs to be based on competency and not this minimum standard that's thrown around like it's sort of a holy thing that we can't touch. That's a minimum standard. That's all it is. And we understand that it's just that. Well, what then makes you go above the minimum standard?
Exactly.
You're not ever tested for anything higher. The only thing that's ever tested is the minimum standard. And that's just not good enough. Like, strive for excellence, do better. And try to inspire others to do better.
The industry deserves it. The public deserves it.
We're there, serve and protect. You're there to do a service. Yes. The dog is there to do an important task. Minimum standard is phoning it in. It's just not good 100%. Enough.
It's an excuse used to reach some type of definable bar that we can say, okay, this is good.
It's a participation trophy.
Yes, absolutely. I agree with that.
That's really all it is.
It's turned into that, at least for a number. There are some that go beyond that. We're not saying all of them are bad, but we're just saying the industry as a whole deserves to reevaluate what we do and how we create a benchmark that says we are qualified to go do this job that we say that we can go do.
It always comes back to people. Like if people made the certifications more realistic, if they weren't out to sort of just do check marks, and then they figure, hey, this is actually pretty tough for the dogs. Like, let's just turn a blind eye to that if the dog sort of makes a mistake because we want the dog certified. It defeats the whole purpose. There's better ways to do it, and it's upon all the people involved to challenge themselves to just do better. To sort of approach the ideal that when we talk about it, when somebody brags about their dog, they're talking about when a dog really did something extraordinary and smashed it, right? And that's what we should strive at all the time, that the dog really does his job. And I understand that there's lots of dogs that find narcotics on the street. Sometimes you wonder how they find it, but they do. But like sometimes it's overwhelmingly easy. That should not be a pat on the back for yourself. That shouldn't be. No. I understand it the first time, like if you first get on the street and the first time you find something, that you're gonna feel proud, and you should. But you can't rest on that. That's just not enough. So
no more, as I heard in Germany, no more Honigschmuggel. No more sugar coating honey on your lips, the term. So, no more BS.
Yeah. So, but like I said, I think if more people would just kind of scrutinize themselves even if you stick with the certifications, if that's what you have to do, you have to be confident that if somebody were to hide in a pricky manner, that your dog could still find it. Just, not just easy stuff. There's stuff that just are slam dunks and all the dogs can do it. But do better.
Absolutely.
And
so
like I said, especially in the bomb world, you have to do better.
For sure. Lives are at stake. So for those who this is their first time experiencing you, how do they find you? And I'll also highlight you do have a Facebook group. It's a private group that they have to pay to be a part of. If your dog could talk, which I love. How do they find you, and how do they learn more, or they want to learn more from you? Where do they go?
Okay, so I'm findable as Armin Winkler on Facebook. I'm also findable under my business name, Ravenna Canine Services. And I also have a business page on Facebook and a website. There's a link. If you go on my page, I always sort of make little posts about the group. That's If Your Dog Could Talk. It's basically I come up with a topic. I kind of talk about that topic and try to analyze it, dissect it the way I do with everything. And then it's a Q&A. And it's a small membership fee for people to come in, and it's just we talk dogs, and I try to explain it a little bit more from the dog side rather than all the stuff that's out there floating around. And some of it is good, and some of it is not so good. But I like to, like I said, give it from the dog's perspective, from what I've learned over many, many years and many, many, many dogs. So
I have some friends that are on there and they love it. Tony Tran from Vegas, and then Gordon Bear from down in Arizona. So I always get.
No, I think it's a fun thing, and for me, the more the merrier, because like somebody asked a question that nobody thought of, but it all of a sudden brings a topic up that just becomes really fun to dissect and kind of answer and deal with. So appreciate it.
Well, thank you for the time that you spent on here. I know you're a busy person, and I just think it was a great just conversation to have that needed to be had. And like I said, people can take away from it what they want, but we are on the same page of we need to be better. And I hope this motivates some people to make some changes where they can, or just push themselves.
And people talk about burnout or blah blah blah. I've been doing this for a long time. I've been doing sport since the 70s. I've been doing it professionally since the middle 80s, and I'm still passionate and fully driven at whatever I do that involves dogs. And I think, maybe if you lose the passion, it's time to get out. It's something that requires more of you than just a job. The extra hour a week for canine care it shouldn't be an incentive. You should want to do it. You should love it. You should you should look forward to training like it's the best day of the week. And it's not just because you don't have to ride shift, but because you actually do the most fun thing that you can do is to work with your dog and get better. So, and if people tell me that they've just been in it just too long, well, I've been in this for a long time. And I admit that there's certain things that really kind of reinvigorated me over the years when I got to work on challenges that were tough for everybody in the industry. And we all had to put our heads together to kind of come up with solutions and concepts and stuff to do better. And those are highly driven individuals that don't need somebody to crack the whip over them. But I'm glad to be at least partially in that world still. So
I've always been thankful for your investment into our community and to challenge us. I always loved going to your lectures at HITS and some of the other ones because these conversations come up where we have to challenge how we view things, maybe call BS where it exists and say, let's look at a different way. But It's through, and we both know this from the worlds we come from. You don't grow being comfortable. You grow through by going through uncomfortable and getting stronger and challenging beliefs and seeing where truth really lies, not just status quo or follow with the
challenge your own beliefs, because people the thing, I'm just old school. Well, I'm really old school, but I don't sit on that. I keep coming up with new ideas and better ideas and concepts that make things better. And if you're not willing to do that anymore, then you're not just old school, you're just lazy. Or uninspired anymore. If you once were inspired, then maybe try to find that again or get out. But it needs to be done not for money, not for Facebook followers. It needs to be done for the passion of the craft, because it is a craft.
Absolutely.
And
the dogmanship.
I'm living it, and I, like you've said, been into some of my HITS lectures, and I always kind of tweak and refine everything, because even though I came up with it so many years ago, if there is a way to sort of fine tune it, improve it, and find new ways, then I'm for that, and I think the whole industry should be that way. We'd all be better, the better for it. So,
absolutely.
Alrighty, sir.
Well, everybody, thank you for tuning in to this episode of K9's Talking Sense, where it's okay to be nosy.